Let me start with something simple. When most people go to Mount Everest, they want one thing: the summit. Even if they tell you otherwise, they want the summit. Andy Politz had already stood on top of Mount Everest years before, and when he went back in 1999, the weather lined up, all the conditions were perfect, but he made the choice not to. He just wasn't interested. Something else had a lock on Andy: George Mallory. And once Andy started pulling on that thread, he couldn't stop. And the summit didn't matter one bit. And so he abandoned any plans to go to the top of the world. If you've watched Everest Mystery for any amount of time, you'll know that I'm not into arguing over the nuances of the mystery of Mallory and Irvine. If anything, the nuances are the things that bring people together. And I'm amazed at how some people get so pulled into the mystery that they get, shall I say, testy over they went this way or they went that way. The Mallory and Irvine story has always been about something different for me. And as you'll find out in this video, so it is with Andy Politz, my climbing partner, on May 16th of 1999, when we returned to the site of George Mallory to do an extensive search of the area. And what drew us there is more about why people keep going into the unknown, even when there's no guarantee of coming back with answers. Andy Politz lives and breathes that philosophy. Andy first went to Everest in the mid-1980s, and then he summited in 1991 from the north side. He was never chasing validation or congratulations. He's a builder, a problem solver, a tinkerer, the kind of guy who wants to understand how things work. Not unlike Sandy Irvine, who was chosen by George Mallory for that final and fateful summit bid on June 8th of 1924. Yes, because he was an athletic marvel, but because Sandy Irvine knew how to fix things. He understood the oxygen apparatus that had befuddled everybody else leading up to that point. Mallory wanted him because of those innate engineering skills, his ability to not only fix, but to improve upon the oxygen apparatus, which was a new technology. But on this occasion that I'm going to share bits of it with you here today in this video, Andy spoke about that entire premise of foregoing the summit and going after the unknown, even with absolutely no guarantees that anything at all will be found. It was pretty clear when I spoke to Andy and hit record that he knew exactly what he was there for, and certainly the summit wasn't it. So you were pulled by the mystery. How's that work?
You know, yeah, the story of that is bigger than a second summit bid, far more fascinating and far more useful to humanity. You know, how do we go deep into the unknown, which is what those guys were doing. And they just did it one step at a time. And, you know, they were told early on at the beginning of the quest in 21, probably, that you're just going to go up there and die.
When Andy said that to me, I stopped for a second. That's Andy's unique perspective on the world. One of only 6 people alive who have ever had the opportunity and the honor of being beside George Lee Mallory. We were there with the 1999 Mallory and Irvine research expedition led by Eric Simonson. It was an expedition that changed the entire trajectory of one of the greatest mysteries in all of exploration. What happened to George Mallory and Sandy Irvine on June 8, 1924? And whether they made it to the summit or not, well, one wonders, how close did Mallory and Irvine get? And Andy Politz was driven to try to reveal that answer. He wanted to know if there was a way we could get emphatic proof of whether they made it to the top or not. And as Andy had shared in our 50-minute conversation, now Don't worry, I'm only going to share select snippets of that conversation with you here today. He shared that they were just coming out of World War I, a time where people already understood risk and the devastating loss of life in a way that we really can't understand in this day and age.
And I believe they also came off of World War I. Talk about a place go and die. And they just took one step at a time. Well, I'm okay now. Well, let's try one more step. And that's the recipe for how you do big things that you don't know how to do. I think anybody who had been through some of these World War I battles or been through war, period, that's not like normal experience, not even a little bit. And to judge these people's capacity against our normal stresses, their capacity is stretched so much from that experience. It's not the same, even close.
You know, given the subject of this video, I've heard a lot of comments from viewers who've said that there are a bunch of channels popping up on YouTube that are pretending to be experts on Mount Everest, covering tragedies and the like, and some even dabbling in the mystery of Mallory and Irvine. And at first, some of them aren't sure if these are legit channels or not. I sure wish that someone would invent a filter that could alert the viewers if a channel was bogus or not. That filter would be kind of like a virtual private network. You've heard of a VPN before. Well, I guess not every dream can come true, filtering out the copycats and the low-budget bogus Everest video channels. VPNs do help a lot of people, though, when it comes to filtering out hackers and other sinister types of entities that are online, trying to get into your personal stuff on your computer. The times you really want a good VPN, like NordVPN, is when you're shopping, for instance, typing in your credit card information. You're just about to click the send button, hoping and praying that the information doesn't get into the wrong hands. There are a ton of people who want to get inside your computer, get your attention, to scam you and take away your hard-earned money and your private information, and that's why you should get NordVPN's Threat Protection Pro. NordVPN makes your browsing safer with a single click. You can use NordVPN for fast and secure streaming, whether you're at home or traveling. And you can use your paid subscriptions from your home country while going abroad. It keeps you safe from phishing, scams, and malware with Threat Protection Pro. Threat Protection Pro makes sure you avoid landing on dangerous websites if you click a phishing link, for instance. It's a certified anti-phishing tool, and NordVPN is the only VPN app to receive official certification from independent testers. Threat Protection Pro detects at least 85% of phishing websites. And that's just the beginning. The best part is you don't need to connect to a VPN server. Threat Protection Pro automatically scans the websites you visit, and it blocks phishing sites before they can cause harm. It uses a proprietary machine learning model trained by experts to recognize even brand new zero-day phishing attacks. It seems to work exactly like that Mount Everest filter that I was dreaming about. NordVPN does everything you need to ensure safe browsing. And get this, they want to give the viewers of Everest Mystery an incentive to check them out. Get the exclusive NordVPN plus 4 months extra when you sign up. The link is in the description. Just click on it and be sure to use the unique code that is in that description so they know you found them right here. And it's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. When you're online, you only want the real thing. And NordVPN is your friend in making sure that you're safe from all those fakes out there who are trying to scam you. Now let's get back to that very unique Everest story that you can only get on the original Everest Mystery. Thanks NordVPN for sponsoring this video. When the 1999 expedition started, I really don't think that there were many of us who truly believed that something would be discovered during that expedition, except for Jochen Hemleb. Jochen was the architect of the entire search area up on the north face that included all the things we absolutely knew about the 1924 expedition, the discovery of the ice axe in 1933, the sighting of an old English dead in 1975, and various other clues taken into consideration. Jochen developed a search manual, and he handed out one of these search manuals to all of us on the expedition. It was our guide to go and look for the remains of Mallory and Irvine. Now, here's one of the most powerful parts of my conversation with Andy, who describes the feeling of being there in 1999 on May 1st, on the day, the time, the moment that George Mallory was discovered. 1999, the morning of May 1st, the incredible day of the discovery of George Mallory. I'd love you to just walk me through how incredibly overwhelming that experience must have been. Seriously, it must have blown your mind on that day to actually find what we were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the best when I heard that was the goal of the trip. I expected that we'd be standing on the North Ridge, waving our arms. Up here is where it would have been, and they would have gone, doing that sort of arm waving. And little did I know, within probably 2 to 3 hours of starting our search, we'd find somebody, purely because, well, we thought at the time nobody had ever looked. Standing there, George Mallory has exactly the same split in his thumb in the same location that I do. And this guy is a legend that I didn't even know that much about. I read a little bit before the trip, read much more after the trip. But this clearly, from a mountaineering standpoint, this guy had stopped his fall. And on my walk down from where I was searching down to when Conrad called us in because he had found something, I'd walk by a couple guys one guy that had fallen on my descent. I told myself I was going to look every one of those guys in the eyes, because that could be me so easily. Those guys were competent climbers as well. Their last thoughts were Stephen King, abject terror. George Mallory was busy stopping his fall. The ice axe you normally lean on first to stop your fall isn't in his hands, whether he gave it away or lost it. The rope broke, the second layer of defense. And so he was after that. He was clawing with his fingers, and one good foot, one broken leg, splinted by his good leg that was digging in the ice. And he stopped his fall because it was steep ground above, a little bit of a flat and steep ground below. And he was slowing down just enough that he could take advantage of that little flat ground and stopped. And then I can just make up in my mind what I think must have gone through his head. When you and I were there, there was sort of a different perspective, and I could step back just a little bit. We were all so overwhelmed. And first we got to take pictures. Not before we touch anything, document this scene. And then as little as possible, what's in his pockets, and go from there. And then we dug into that hard ground to hit a strap under his shoulder that disappeared underneath him. And so there was a pouch of some kind in there, but nobody could get at it because it's frozen, and dug for hours, something like 5 hours, as if you had a 1 pound ice axe, an ultralight ice axe, and you're digging through your asphalt driveway with it. I mean, it was that kind of density of rock and ice. And then finally got to the pouch, and, thinking maybe there was a camera in there somewhere. The goal would be to find a picture of them standing on the summit, ice axe held high, that they had done it. Whether or not they had or not, and what we believed had happened.
I have goosebumps and I wasn't there. I feel it because I remember going 2 weeks later, but that must have been a pivotal event in life. There are only a few things in life that go up there. That must have been
on that shelf. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first name tag, we thought, this can't be Mallory. We still couldn't believe it was Mallory. We thought Irvine was wearing Mallory's jacket or whatever it was. The first item was. By the second name tag, we realized we were here with George Mallory. We were here with a legend. This was right up there with all the legends we've ever known about, from King Arthur on down. And we got it settled in fairly deeply, heavily, just why this guy was a legend. One, he stopped his fall. Two, we're looking at the clothing this guy's wearing. I mean, he's dressed to go out on the town in the one winter's night, not spending the night climbing through the night on Mount Everest in 1924. Even nowadays, it'd be so much easier than it would have been back then. They didn't know the mountain. They didn't know the route. They didn't know the weather patterns. They didn't know how humans would react to those altitudes. They didn't know if their oxygen would make it. How long? There's no way that oxygen would have made it. Their quantity of oxygen they were carrying and the rate they were breathing. George Mallory didn't have a mask. He had a tube that he bit between his teeth when he needed some air. He'd open up the hose more. And they may have had some kind of a mask, but that's not what he had.
Andy said it, and he implied with the words Stephen King, abject terror. It makes me wonder what happens in a fall just before you're pretty certain that this is the end for you, and those last second frantic efforts to try to save yourself. As Andy sees it, Mallory was fighting, thinking, and reacting. After the discovery of Mallory on May 1st, the entire team headed back down to base camp for an extended period of time to regroup and replan the way that we were going to use the rest of our time on the mountain. The plan ultimately was to go back up to our high camp where, notably, Conrad Anker was going to attempt to climb the second step, which was the major obstacle that Mallory and Irvine would have encountered if they did try the ridge route. And, well, we know that in 1960, the Chinese got up and over the second step by actually with one of the climbers standing on the shoulders of another climber in order to surmount the crux of the second step. And then of the 6 of us, 2 of us would go back to the site of Mallory to do an extensive search with a metal detector to look notably there for the camera, which we hoped we would find that would reveal the fate of Mallory and Irvine and whether they made it to the summit or not. And now going back to the site of George Mallory wasn't out of curiosity, it was born out of responsibility. This was the one time that we could go to that site and look extensively for more clues of the last days of Mallory and Irvine. And as I said earlier, Andy had with him a metal detector that we were going to use and try to find anything we possibly could to bring the story back home to the family of George Mallory, still living, 3 children in their 70s and 80s. It was important for us to go and do everything we could. And herein is the crux of Andy foregoing or abandoning the summit in order to find more answers as to the fate of, now in this instance, of George Mallory. In Andy's mind, and in mine as well, we were drawn by something more lasting than the idea of standing on the summit. As a team, we realized that this wasn't a completed job yet. And you and I had a very short discussion that was George Mallory traveled around the world. sharing his stories of Mount Everest and how much he loved it and how important it was to the world and to him, and to not go and look as best as we could would actually be an injustice to him. And so, boom, we got to work. What is your belief of to how far they made it? Do you think they made it? Was it possible? And have you ever worked out a scenario in your mind of what might have happened?
So, well, could they have made it? Oh, of course. Could they have climbed the second step? Well, they didn't have to do it in pure technique. Could George Mallory have stood on Andrew Irvine's shoulder and reached the hand jam of hand jams? You couldn't have fallen out if both your legs popped off. That hand jam was so good that it's so natural. I don't think there's any trouble with them having climbed the second step. Even going from a shoulder to an upraised arm, all those were techniques that were being done once in a while at the time. And then it's just a matter of finishing off that long ridge to the top. And I'm sure that's a hard day, but what they were looking at back then was Europe that had been decimated from war, from 4 years of war, bombing, and just cities in rubble, and having to rebuild. 9 million people had died, 37 million people were injured, and unbelievable amounts of pain. And I think they knew what the summit of Mount Everest would do for their country, just like the North Pole or the South Pole had done for those countries. Could they have done it? Yeah. Were they motivated? Yeah, it would be a career move to be the first to climb the highest point on Earth. Sure, that's a good move. And I would think that's a driver for George Mallory and Andrew Irvine. But I think at the same time, being rich and famous is not a good enough motivator to face very difficult situations. You may start, I'm going to be rich and famous if I can do that. Not really. Tons of people have done it. Yeah. But you may start with some vision like that, some foggy idea that's what's going to be but very soon reality steps in and it's survival. And then rich and famous doesn't matter anymore.
Andy didn't need another summit. He was serving a higher calling, going after answers to this fascinating mystery that only 6 living people can actually give a firsthand account of. And so what would you do? I posted a poll on Everest Mystery earlier in the week that has hundreds of answers that poses this question. Imagine being on a mountain, Mount Everest, fit, acclimatized, with a real shot at the summit, and choosing instead to follow something that has no guarantee. And so the question ultimately asks, would you forego your summit bid with the high likelihood of success to search for Mallory and Irvine or clues to their fate in 1924, knowing that there's a high possibility that you might find nothing at all? I find the answers fascinating. 32% said yes, I would forego the summit. The search matters much more. 16% said no, summits are once in a lifetime. And then more than 50% are happy to be down at sea level and would be satisfied binge watching Everest Mystery videos. Can't thank you enough for that one. And so I'll post the link to that poll question in the description of this video, and I hope that you'll go and answer, because these polls are always up, and there's a ton of polls on Everest Mystery that I think that you'll enjoy participating in. And as a side note, Andy did get a chance to return to Everest in 2021. He was asked to go guide on the south side of the mountain, and 30 years after his first summit, Andy made it again to the summit of Mount Everest. So I guess it didn't really matter after all in 1999, but he did get that second summit in. And so, as we know, Everest doesn't give answers easily. Sometimes it gives you something entirely different, a perspective beyond our own reality. What do you think? I hope you'll take a moment to leave a comment and let us know your thoughts about this story. And please, if you haven't done so already and you're enjoying this video, I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe and also consider becoming a member of this channel, where there is tons of exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you can do that here on this channel or find it over on patreon.com/Everest Mystery, where, by the way, there's also a free level of exclusive member content. And of course, check out the merchandise page, which I will put a link to in the description. And as always, do a good deed. Don't ask for anything in return. Make the world a better place, one tiny step at a time. Peace be with you.